everyone, and welcome to the Frames for Thought podcast. I am your actor, Mark Manning, and with me always is... Just kidding, he's not with me today. Today I'm going to be talking all by myself. It's a special Canada Day episode, and I just want to discuss a couple of Canadian TV shows that really influenced me and I think are really good and worth checking out. Hello everyone, and welcome to our first ever mini episode where just one of us is going to talk about a topic. Just so happened that Alex had a lot to do. It is Canada Day, and he has a family, so he got a little bit busy. So it's just going to be me today, and I thought I'd take this opportunity because it is Canada Day to talk about some very Canadian-specific TV shows. Ones that you may know of. I definitely think most of you will know of at least one of them. I'm only going to be talking about 4. And I'm going to keep it kind of short. I'm not going to go into big details about it. I'm just going to talk about aspects of these shows that I personally found very entertaining, or things that kind of resonate with me as a performer, or things I think are interesting and might be lacking a little bit from some of the more popular shows of today. So this show in particular, it's a reality TV show, or quote-unquote reality TV show, because I'm pretty sure there was some stuff that they tried to play off as real that was actually like faked and staged. Especially a lot of the more outrageous stuff. But I want to talk about Kenny versus Spenny. Now, this show is, in my opinion, very funny. So it's a show that I think was very underrated, but it got 6 seasons. So the concept of the show is that you have these two best friends, Kenny and Spenny, and they live together, and they challenge each other to different random challenges, and whoever loses has to do a humiliation at the end of the episode. This is definitely not a show for kids. It's a more adult-oriented show for sure. It's a hilarious concept, and I think what I like the most about it is from its more creative writing standpoint. Because again, it isn't like a normal show. It's presented as a reality TV show. And, you know, I assume a lot of the reactions do seem very genuine and real, but there's definitely some stuff that's been scripted. But some of the challenges that really stand out, and to kind of see where the comedic elements go with it, the ones that kind of stand out in my brain, I actually think about these like episodes semi-frequently because I'm a loser like that. First one is, first guy to stop singing loses, which if you don't want to watch an episode with two people who can't sing trying to sing for 24 hours, like straight, I completely understand and I completely agree with you. But what makes it so fun to watch is, so Spenny is your very straight-laced guy and Kenny is like your rogue, and he just is really wacky and he's devilish. And so you have Spenny singing all of these copyright-free songs, like Christmas music and stuff. And so he's just doing it, right? He's just doing the challenge. He just keeps on singing and singing and singing. Where Kenny, on the other hand, is like making music videos and just singing about, like, he sings a song about a dog pooping because when they're walking, he sees a dog pooping. And it's... The level he goes with all these costume changes and these different styles of music that he uses is fantastic. And by the end of the day, their crew, you can see that they're all just so mad and they just want the two of them to shut up because they didn't think it would go this long. And Kenny's voice is dying and Spenny is just like turns into a robot just singing like row, row, row your boat over and over and over. And the challenge ends when Kenny just goes to the kitchen, grabs a bottle of Windex, and just sprays it into Spenny's mouth so he can't keep singing. So you have this big elaborate episode with all these cuts and all these like really amazing catchy songs, and it just ends with a spray ball to the mouth, and it's really fun. Another one that I really enjoyed, I think about a lot, is first guy to touch the ground, he loses. Now, first of all, it's fun because that's like a game you play as a kid, right? The floor is lava. And so they see these two adults do it, and to see how they get around their house or they go out and like buy groceries and stuff, it's really funny, like the workarounds that they come up with and then the strategies that they use to kind of prevent the other person from staying off the ground. What makes it really funny is that Spenny designs this swing, an adult swing, I'll say, and he hangs it up in one of the rooms, and as he's sitting in it, Kenny gets rid of his like 2 whomper stompers that he was using, like, you know, it was like the 2 buckets with rope with string. He got rid of those 2 buckets so that Spenny couldn't walk anymore and he was stuck in the chair. And then Kenny goes and he dresses up in a suit and he takes this like piece of bread and he's just like petting this bread and he acts like a Bond villain and he's like rolling around in a wheelchair being like, oh, hello, Mr. Spenny, and like he puts like a kid's swimming pool underneath him and fills it with water and puts in an eel and like a piranha, and it's just like, it's so lame and none of it works the way Kenny wants it to, and that's what makes it so funny, is that Spenny's just sitting there like just being annoyed for like an entire episode, and it's really funny. And then like he brings in I don't know what the device is called, but you see it at like a lot of game parks and stuff where like it shoots the softballs and you hit the softballs with the bat. It's like a self pitcher machine or something. He brings one of those and just starts shooting stuff at him. And what makes it awesome is that, again, it's one of those ones that ends where Kenny is using a Segway to get around, and he gets on it and he loses control and falls. So like Spenny didn't even do anything and he wins. And whenever Spenny wins, it actually feels like really good because Spenny doesn't cheat. Like he only cheats like once or twice in the entire 6 season, like almost 100 episode. I wouldn't say it's almost 100, but it's a good fair amount. And he only like cheats 1 or 2 times, where Kenny cheats constantly. So it's always fun to see Spenny like win and win legitimately, but it doesn't happen very often. And then the last one I want to talk about, and again, and I like this one because it's just this really simple concept, and it's who can be tied to a goat the longest. I mean, like, so all you gotta do is just tie rope to your ankle and then tie it to a goat, and then just walk around with this goat and just live your life with a goat. Again, it's so simple, but then like the humor of it, of just like always being attached to a goat. And like a goat's like, it's not like a dog or anything, it's a goat. And so it's so weird and it's so far out there, and it's like, why would you even think about that? They have challenges that like are kind of obvious, like who could stay up the longest, who can live in a car for the longest, like things like that. And then you have this like, who can be tied to a goat? And so it's just like, you're really just putting up with like smells, essentially, is all you're really doing. But I like this one because the deviousness of how Kenny wins is perfect. So they have this fight in the episode about like, okay, I guess we'll be tied to goats forever, because it is like a pretty easy concept, really, when you think about it. Like being tied to a goat isn't super hard. Kenny goes out to a butcher's and he buys like a goat, like a full dead goat, and he puts it on the table and just waits for Spenny to come home. And Spenny comes home and sees it. Kenny just goes like, yeah, like I had my goat killed and here it is. Like I can be tied to this thing forever now. I can just chop it up, still tied to it. And then like Spenny gets so distraught that he just unties his goat, and then out of the closet Kenny releases his goat, and it's like, yeah, like I always had the goat attached to me the whole time. And I just think that's like a really clever way. And this again, like things I think are really scripted. Like that's a moment that I think is scripted, because I don't see why Spenny would take off, like untie the goat at that point. It doesn't really make sense. It feels like it's something they just chose to do to end the episode. But again, it's a very funny show, and it's very clever, and it kind of gets you kind of thinking about how much fun you can have with such a simple concept. And so like when I'm thinking about writing stuff, I sort of think of like that. So like, again, who can sleep in the car the longest? Well, how far can you take that? Well, Kenny turned the car that they were sleeping into literally an apartment. He had his bed, he had a microwave, he had a refrigerator, like he turned it into an apartment. I wouldn't think about doing that. That wouldn't be something that crossed my mind. I would just tough it out like Spenny did. So it was to kind of have that, it kind of helps a creative person kind of expand their mind and kind of see the things that they can do. Okay, it's enough about Kenny versus Spenny. I could talk about it a little bit more. There's still a few episodes that are kind of worth mentioning. But I want to move to something that is definitely scripted, 100%. I don't know how famous this show is anymore, but I think it's a show that demands a lot of respect. And I think it's a show that, if you look at what Canada can produce with like Canadian actors in a Canadian setting, I think it's one of the best examples of something that we have as a national TV show. And that's going to be North of 60, which came out in 1990, and it ran 6 seasons until 1997. So the concept of the show is that we're at a reserve up in northern Alberta. It's basically the middle of nowhere, and we follow Michelle Kanindi. I just know her as Michelle in the show. and she's played by Tina Keeper. She's a police officer. And they kind of, as the show goes on, they cycle her partners out, and it's like her partners are usually like white men. Tina herself is a First Nations woman, and again, like right of reserve, so the majority of the cast are First Nations. And I really think there's only like 2 or 3 characters that are Caucasian. Having it be kind of a cop show out in the middle of nowhere is essentially what it is. They have this whole community surrounding it as well. And so you're really following the drama of the communities as well as the criminal element that can happen up there. So one of my favorite characters, and I just think he's so interesting. The character's name is Albert Golo, played by Gordon Tututsisi. He's fantastic because he's like this mob boss in the middle of nowhere, and he's responsible for like a lot of drug trade and a lot of violence, and the whole community knows that he's not a good person, but he brings in like a lot of money into the community. So a lot of people, like a lot of shopkeepers, are willing to kind of look the other way because this is how they'll make their profit. And there's a lot of like young men and young women in that town that they don't have a lot of options. You basically have to move away to really make money. So having Albert there, he gets a lot of protection because he can provide these people with money. You have this interesting power dynamic that could only happen in a situation like that. It's not like he's this big time mob boss in New York, right? It's a reservation, it's a small community. Everyone knows each other, everyone knows what everyone's up to, and it's really fun. I know as a child I really didn't get into it because it's like, again, it's not really a show for kids, but as an adult I really appreciate it. I feel like, and it was a launching point for a lot of First Nation actors to get really seen by a wider audience in Canada. And I think in the States too. I don't know how it played in the States, but I know in Canada it was a big show. I think a lot of writers and actors of Canada, like Canadian writers and actors, should really go out of their way and try to binge this show if you can find it. I'm not sure where you can find it right now, but I really do think it's fantastic. It's a really good show. I don't want to get too much into it because it's one of those things where it's sort of like Breaking Bad, where like the seasons will have these stories kind of go on in it, and I don't want to spoil any of it. But there's some really solid character work that I think actors really need to like watch and appreciate. It's a really good show. It's really worth really worth watching. Go out and check out North of 60, especially if you are a Canadian. And this is the kind of stuff that's coming out of like Canadian TV shows that I do miss. Like I can't remember another show that is as compelling or as like realistic too. It's very realistic and down to earth. I don't know anything that Canada has made in like the last 10 years that compares to it. Maybe there's something I'm missing. Maybe there's something that's Canadian that I don't know what's Canadian. But I know for sure that North of 60, it's a show and a style of a show that's really missed up here in Canada. So it's really worth taking a look. Oh, and I also just want to notice, I just remembered now, there's a character named TV, played by Dakota House. And he has one of the best character journeys in a TV show. He does a really good job at making it very realistic. And so Dakota House, I don't know what he's done since, but yeah, the character of TV is very interesting. He goes from a potential another Albert, really, because he was like a really bad kid who just always gets into trouble, into being like a carpenter tradesperson. You see the sort of struggle it is from coming from that life and then getting to where he is at the end, and like all the people who are trying to screw him over that as well. It's very interesting. And again, you got to remember, it's like a small community. And so like, why would you try to screw over like your only carpenter in the city, or sorry, not the city, in your town? Again, it's interesting. I think you should really take a look at it if you're interested as being a character actor or as a dramatic writer. I think it's really worth taking a look. Now, I'm pretty sure the vast majority of people have heard of this show. It's very Canadian. When you think of Canadian comedy, it's probably like way up there as one of them. And that is, of course, Corner Gas, created by Brent Butt, who is a stand-up comedian from Canada. This show, to me, the first like 2 seasons is a little bit rough. I feel once you get past that, and that's when the show really finds its groove, it sort of becomes like a more wholesome live action Family Guy, where they have cutaway gags and they have these guest appearances, and it's super super Canadian. Like you even have like prime ministers and show up as guests, and hockey players and CFL stars, and it's super Canadian. So the way it works, if you don't know, is that Corner Gas takes place in Dog River, which is an extremely small town in Saskatchewan. And Brent Butt works at the local gas station, and the banter in the show comes off like way wittier than you would expect, and the timing of the jokes is really good as well. There's a lot of dry pan, especially from Brent Butt, but it's a lot of dry pan, and it sort of shows like a really good elements of comedy when it comes to like the give and take. And what's also fun about it is because it's episodic type show. One episode, Brent is the one who's trying to solve people's problems, or he's like the straight man or whatever. But then in the next episode, like his problem is the one that turns him into the crazy person, because a small town is just full of crazy people. It's very Canadian in the sense that it's very wholesome. I would argue it's simple, but simple comedy works just as well as complicated comedy. It has a good flow, has a really good pacing to it, but I do know there's a handful of people who don't like the show, and I'm completely okay with people not liking the show. I probably like it more than the average person does. I still watch it to this day. You can find it on Crave. You can find the whole show on Crave. It's actually a show I like to binge when I'm doing something else. So if I'm writing something, or if I'm playing a game, or if I'm painting, like depending on whatever it is I'm doing, sometimes I'll just throw Corner Gas in on the background. You can kind of tune in and out of it, I guess, because it's not very complex. Like I said, it's very simple, and that makes it easy to kind of be background noise. You hear the jokes, you can enjoy the jokes, and it's not really necessary that you have to see them most of the time. It is really witty banter, I guess would be the best way to describe the writing style of the show, which is very 1-2-1-2, you know. So it's good. It's a lot of fun. There's some actors I want to mention, because these are actors that if you watch things like The X-Files, you'll see these actors on episodes of The X-Files, but this show is a really big break for them, and I just kind of want to just name drop like Gabrielle Miller, Nancy Robertson, and then so one of my favorite characters is Oscar Leroy, who is Brent Butt's father in the show. He's just a crazy old man, and he's played by Eric Peterson, who is a stage actor. He was famous for doing a one-man show that went across the country, and I can't fully remember what it was, but I remember hearing from a lot of people in the theater community when I was talking about Corner Gas, they would bring up this one-man show that Eric Peterson did, and it was very fantastic. So, and it wasn't a comedy, it was a dramatic piece, and so to see him jump from this like serious one-man show into playing like essentially a senile old kook, it was fantastic. It's a fantastic, shows a lot of range, right? And that's sort of what all of us want to be as actors, is we want to be able to have that range to go from like kind to angry in a second. Like we want to be able to have that energy and to be that type of chameleon that directors and producers want us to be. Janet Wright, who played Emma Leroy, his mother, she's fantastic. She's no longer with us, unfortunately. And then I just want to mention really quickly, Sergeant David Quinton, played by Lauren Cardinal, and then Constable Karen Pelly, played by Tara Spencer Narian. I remember actually seeing her in Wishmaster 4, I think. Yeah, it's Wishmaster 4. It made me very happy as an actor to see someone go from something like Wishmaster 4, which out of the Wishmasters isn't a very good one, and I don't think a lot of people have seen that movie, and I don't blame people for not seeing that movie, to being a regular on this show. No matter what you think about Corner Gas, you really can't argue the impact it's made. It's made a lot of money. It's still on TV, on reruns. Like, you really can't say that it wasn't a successful show. It was very successful, and it's nice to see a Canadian show like this get the success that I personally think it deserves, because I personally think it's a very solid, and I think it's a very funny and entertaining show. And I'm glad to keep watching it. I'm glad it's still around. This next show I'm going to talk about, because so far really the only show that's like good for all ages would be Corner Gas. And this next show is definitely definitely not for kids. Um, and that is, and I think it's probably the most popular show I'm going to mention, coming out of Canada, Trailer Park Boys. Now, um, I love Trailer Park Boys. I think it is one of the funniest shows that has ever been written. And again, to kind of go back, cause sort of the theme of this episode, as I'm realizing as I'm going through it, sort of the theme of it is creativity, commitment to acting. These are sort of the, like, this is what I'm sort of getting at by mentioning these shows. So, like, even if you don't think the shows themselves are good, you don't like the content of the show, like, you don't like the swearing in Trailer Park Boys, you think Kenny vs. Penny is immature, North of 60 is too dry for you, you don't think Corner Gas is funny, all those are fine. All those are fine. You don't have to like these shows, but I think you should be able to appreciate the commitment to acting and the styles of acting, as well as how creative the writing can be for these shows. Trailer Park Boys, I love it. So they do it sort of like The Office, you know, where it's like a team following around this group of people filming their day-to-day lives. I think it's a really good way actually to present the show, because it's fun to get those cutaways where they're talking to the camera. What really makes it stand out over all the other shows I've mentioned, well, maybe not so much over North of 60, I'd say North of 60 is on par with this, but the level of commitment of the actors to their characters. The perfect examples of this in the show would be Rob Wells playing Ricky, who is my favorite character in the show. A lot of people like Mike Smith as Bubbles as their favorite, and I do think Bubbles is a great character, but Ricky is my favorite. Ricky's whole character, and I'm gonna try to be as PG about this show as possible right now, but Ricky's whole character is that he's extremely dumb. He is so dumb. He can't even speak English properly. If you want to, you can go on YouTube and look up Rickyisms, because he takes phrases, messes them up. He just doesn't know how to say them correctly. He calls raccoons rakins, because that's how he read it in a book, you know? So they're not raccoons, they're rakins. And I like, one of the things with Bubbles, and why a lot of people love Bubbles, is because, like, Bubbles is super cute. So in the same realm of Ricky saying rakins, Bubbles calls, like, Bigfoot or Sasquatch, he calls him Sam Squanch. And he says him like that because that's how he always called him since he was a little fella. And so that's how he talks. So, and another thing about this show that I really, really enjoy is its level of creativity. And this again kind of goes with the Kenny versus Spenny thing, where like Ricky lives out of his car because he can't afford a trailer because he has no money. And it's like an old garbagey car. And the things they come up with, like how a person could survive living in a car with no money, is fantastic. Like, I can't go into full details because, again, I'm trying to keep it PG, but he does these things. He comes up with these devices. He, just like using garbage around the trailer park, he's able to create, like, everyday objects that just work, you know? And it's so funny because they get their carpenter team or whatever together and they just build these, okay, Bubbles lives in a shed, right? And so, like, how nice could they make living in a shed? It looks really nice, like the way they build up his shed. And it's, I don't even know where to go with what I'm trying to say, but it's one of those things that when you watch the show, you'll just see, like, these little things about how they address living situations, or, you know, if they hurt themselves, they tape themselves up with duct tape and stuff. And it's just really because they can't afford to go to the hospital, or what they did was illegal, so they can't go to the hospital. So they just duct tape their arm instead of getting a cast. Like, it's really funny. So another thing I'm going to talk about is the, like, one other performance, which I think he steals the show. I think a lot of people would agree with me that without him, the show wouldn't work. It wouldn't have been as successful as it was. And that's Jim Leahy, played by John Dunsworth. Jim Leahy is, when you talk about commitment to a character, John Dunsworth destroys. Like, he is so committed to the Jim Leahy role. It is so impressive, and it's like, like he plays a drunk trailer park supervisor, and he's just always like he's always too drunk, and the physical comedy he does where you think he's gonna like kill himself and he's just fine. He was, I should say, because sadly he's passed, but he was so talented and he was so committed and he was so believable with everything he did. Even if it was like beyond extreme with what he was doing, you still believed everything he did. And it's so incredible to watch. And it's that level of commitment to the role, to what he was doing. And it's inspiring. Like, it really is. And again, this is like a stupid like comedy show about a drunk trailer park supervisor, but it's so entertaining. It's so fun. I can't imagine anybody not appreciating the amount of work that John Dunsworth put into that character. And it is such a foundation to the entire show, because Jim Leahy and Randy, they're essentially the bad guys to Julian, Ricky, and Bubbles. And like Julian and Ricky are just always coming up with like schemes and like to break the law and make money, but only break the law a little bit because they don't want to go to jail. And Bubbles is always there to kind of tell them, like, to be the moral, like, no, don't do this. But it's also his best friend, so he helps. And then Jim Leahy and Randy are always trying to like catch them and get them sent back to jail. God, I just can't get over just like how, like, everyone I just mentioned, like Julian, Ricky, Bubbles, Jim, Randy, I would even say like J-Rock, J to the ROC. He like so committed. And then there's like Trevor, Corey, all these characters are just such good character actors. Like in the first couple seasons, it's more down to earth, but then they just start going like hog wild as the show takes off. And again, without having like Jim Leahy to be that layer to hold the boys accountable, you don't have a show. It's a fantastic show. It's very popular. It's very popular around the world. There's a lot of people who love this show, and I think they love it, again, the commitment to the character, the creativeness of the writing, the simplicity and realism of what's going on. And I really think that defines Canadian TV shows, because it's simple, the actors commit to their characters, it's down to earth, and it's believable. And I mean, for me, these are 4 shows I find very memorable, and they make me proud, to be a Canadian, because I really think these are quality shows. I just want to take this time to mention some Canadian TV shows and why I like them and what I think the value is to actors and writers and directors and producers. I hope you enjoyed this Canada-filled episode, and I want to speak to you next time. Later. The Frames for Thought podcast uses royalty-free music from Track Tribe and RKVC. Thanks for listening.